Anyone have any questions you want to ask, whether related to this subject or any other misconceptions that you may have heard or you need clarity on? Yes, right here. Sheikh.
I'll be loud.
Can you hold the mic up to you?
Okay, so there are so you're saying that you need context to understand certain things in the seerah or misconceptions in what people perceive to be in Islam. Now, what if there are people that say that hadith or the things that was recorded of the time of the Rasul ﷺ is just in relation to the context of that time and is not applicable today? Or it's just like what people say, well, this is just something that I've heard that I don't believe in, but I just want to know how to retaliate. That it's just a bunch of men trying to basically record and maintain a patriarchal society.
So basically, the collection of hadith that we have is just basically perpetuates this patriarchal society that they lived in. So all of what we have of information that has been recorded and documented is only perpetuating that culture of male chauvinism and patriarchy. Is that the question? Is that the question? Okay. Tayyib. Who wants to handle that?
Well, let me say first of all that in actuality, there are some hadith, there are some ayahs of the Qur'an that if you look at them on face value, they are a bit problematic. They can be a bit problematic. So the scholars of Islam came, as I told you guys earlier, and they dealt with these issues. No stone has been left unturned by the ulama of Islam, and there's so much specialization in knowledge, in the branches of knowledge. What freaks me out as a revert Muslim is how one of us from our community, young person, old person, whatever, he doesn't know his elbow from his ankle bone in this religion. And he thrust himself in the arena to say, I don't accept that, I don't accept this, I reject this, I reject that. And the person doesn't know if the noon as-sakin were to hit him in his head, he doesn't know that's the noon as-sakin. And he rejects the sunnah in its totality. And he brings these arguments and these misunderstandings that just are clear indications, hey, something is wrong with you. You don't know enough about your religion. So feel okay with saying, I don't know, and being quiet. So as it relates to this, Allah mentioned in the Qur'an about himself, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. Allah wasn't forgetful. Allah didn't forget. This religion that he sent down over 1400 years ago, he allowed certain things like being married to women from Ahlul Kitab. The Prophet said that the Jews and the Christians split into 72 sects, 73 sects. He knew that there were different sects. Ahlul Kitab, you can marry them, provided the girl is not doing lewdness and so forth and so on. So a person comes now with all of this stuff. No, these are the new Christians of today. So that's a different time. And this is a different place. So you can't do this particular thing and that thing. And these ayahs and these ahadith, all they're doing is just maintaining the status quo of before. So people are coming with these types of arguments. I think the issue really goes back first and foremost. For me to deal with what you're asking and what you're saying is, we need to relax a little bit in regards to knowing our position and knowing our abilities, first of all. Second of all, there are always explanations that are plausible and they're easy to take on board for the person who has a clear heart. For everything that may be problematic for the person in Islam, what is from the mushkil, those ayat and ahadith that are hard to understand. The man came to the masjid. He said, Ya Rasulullah, can I kiss my wife while I'm fasting? He said, yes. The companions witnessed that. Another man came in, asked the same question after him. Can I kiss my wife while I'm fasting? He said, no. Not a single companion said, oh, let me get rid of this sunnah. Look at these hadith. Just give me the Qur'an. I don't want anything else. You see how this Qur'an refutes the sunnah is like this hadith? Instead, they did what Allah told them to do. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask those who know if you don't know. They say, Ya Rasulullah, that man came, he asked a question. He came and he asked the same question. You gave different answers. He said, as for that one, he's a sheikh. He's older. He can take care, he can handle himself. As for this one over here, he's young. I'm afraid if I allow that for him, it'll lead to the next thing. So he put the whole situation into context with a plausible explanation right then and there. But do you see how the companions dealt with it? As for today, I made Hajj with people this year. I made Hajj with people who were saying, just give me the Qur'an, don't give me the Sunnah. And yet, he stood in line for 3 hours to kiss the black stone, and there's nothing in the Qur'an about that.
MashaAllah.
And the other one was going crazy to drink Zamzam water, and there's nothing in the Qur'an about that. And on and on and on and on. It's just people who are a bit confused.
Well, I would go as far as to say, because it seems like that's a more feminist approach to say that. When we start using terms like patriarchal, matriarchal, that's a feminist dialogue. And I would go as far to say that, yes, absolutely, that Islam does promote patriarchal system of family. Absolutely. Putting the man as the head of the household. Absolutely. I don't make any excuses for that. And one of the things that we can't do is we should never be on defense in Islam. We never allow somebody to put you on defense, meaning that we allow people to bring up their dialogues and their discussions into our discussion in Islam and put us on defense and say, well, no, it's not. If it's not a patriarchal system, then what is it in Islam? What is it? Is not the man the head of his household? Is not the man accountable and responsible for whatever happens in the household? Does not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the man at the forefront of the household? الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Does not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً, that the men, they have a degree of authority and responsibility over them? So yes, it is a patriarchal system, and I don't make any excuses for that. And I mean, if it's not, then it's a matriarchal system where the woman is at the head of the household, or there is no head of the household. There's only 3 ways this can go. Either the man is at the head of the household, the woman is at the head of the household, or there's no head of the household. And this is what they want to do. They want to put Muslims on defense in terms of their religion, and we can't make any excuses for that. It is what it is. I don't know if that answers your question. Yes, next question. Sheikh Hatem.
تفضل. الله يبارك فيك. المشايخ ما شاء الله they made very good points about the issue of pedophilia and the issue of like the womanizer argument. I just wanted to add like one thing to the pedophilia.
Can we bring a chair up here for you, please?
No.
Please, Sheikh.
No, I am good here.
Bless us with your presence.
I know I'm good here.
We want everyone to see you, plus we want it to be recorded, please.
No. I just wanted to say about the pedophilia. If you are, because of my specialty, so I just need, if there are any physicians here in this crowd, are there any physicians in the crowd? Any physicians in the crowd? Huh? Where? Oh, sit down? Oh, no, I don't need to sit down. I don't need to sit down. No, I just wanted to ask if there are any physicians in the crowd. There is one? Okay, he's a pediatrician, in fact. What is the lowest age of puberty? The lowest age at which a woman reaches puberty? Normal age. It actually is as low as 8. And in textbooks, they will tell you that if a woman of a Caucasian descent started puberty at 8, that would not be late. And for an African American woman or girl, if she starts at age 7, they say that this would not be pathological. You do not need to work her up, right? You don't need to do a workup if a woman starts puberty at age 8. What is the last age at which a woman could reach puberty? What is basically after which you start to look into primary amenorrhea? Menarche, not puberty only, but menarche. It is 16. And if you go back, so what is the range from 8 to 16? So a 9-year-old could have reached puberty, could be post-pubertal. Basically, she is ready according to God, not according to the basically the legislature of this city or that city that decided that the age should be 14. In the USA, in some states, the lowest age for marriage is 14, and in others it's 18. So here, if this is the border, here it is child molestation, here you are a law-abiding husband.
Right, exactly. Very good point.
Very good point. But in Islam, it's about puberty. That is why the scholars say that the heat should not be allowed to consummate the marriage until she is capable, emotionally, physically capable. So the issue is an issue of puberty. Like I said, and go back and check it out. So the lowest age for puberty is 8, and the highest age is 16. A 9-year-old could be heavier, a normal 9-year-old could be heavier and taller than a normal 14-year-old. Could be heavier and taller because she reached puberty earlier. The second, there's so much to say about this issue, by the way. There are 17 good points, and it is on my website, the answers to this particular issue. But the other issue that is important to say also is, what was the lowest age? Now, the lowest age of consensual sex, or the lowest age for marriage here in America, varies from state to state. But 200 years ago, not 1400 years ago, 200 years ago, what was the lowest age for consensual sex in the state of California? 1800. What was the lowest age for consensual sex? 10. And go back and check it out. So within 200 years, the culture changed so much that if you think of a 10-year-old now, it will be like crazy. So that's the one thing. The other thing with regard to the womanizer argument, you have to use argumentation through ilzam. Ilzam meaning to refer the person back to his own value system, to judge his argument according to his belief system. If it disqualifies the Prophet from conveying the message that he married 9 women, how could they include within the Bible the Songs of Solomon, who married 300 women and had 700 concubines? How could they include in the very Bible that they are saying from God a message that came to them through David? Forget about what they call him, King David, messenger, this or that. They are including a message that came from God to them through him, even though David alayhi salam had 100 women. So if it disqualifies, how could it be possible? So that is the idea of the Islamophobes' glass house. But I want to tell you one thing, that it is not just that. It is not just that what they have what we have. So don't throw stones at me because you also have a glass house. What we have is protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For every text they criticize, we have a perfect explanatory context, but they don't have explanatory context for every text. This issue of jihad that I just wanted to glance over quickly in my speech. For every text we have a perfect explanatory context, but how could you provide an explanatory context for killing the children and the infants and everything that breathes? For killing the suckling infants. Not
to cut you off. You was on a roll though. We want to follow you on that journey, Sheikh, but we want to give some other people an opportunity to ask. But Jazakallah khair, we appreciate that. Allah is khair. Have another question? Yes.
Give him a mic. Take his baby.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair for all your explanations, particularly on the issue of pedophilia. Now,
all the explanations that you have are very solid, perhaps due to my own deficiency in understanding, or perhaps because of the society I grew up in. I'll be honest with you. It's still strange to me when you tell me, okay, a 40-year-old or plus guy married a 9-year-old girl. And it's something that, you know, anybody who's a product of our society is going to have to grapple with. So my question is it inappropriate, and this, Sheikh Hatem, please feel free to comment on this, is it inappropriate or is it blasphemous to start a conversation like that by saying, yes, in our society, a 40-year-old man having a relationship with a 9-year-old girl is considered pedophilia. But in that society, in that time, then going back to the points that you gentlemen brought up, which is, in that society, all of our ancestors, my ancestors, your ancestors, and every historical figure you know, that was a norm for them when the life expectancy was 20 years old. They had to do things differently. But, you know, especially since an attack on the Prophet ﷺ is really an attack on Islam today, and starting by trying to explain that context without at least saying that, no, as Muslims we don't believe, and if it's true that we don't believe that, you know, in our society today that's an acceptable relationship, would be a good place to start.
Well, that's a good point that you bring up, and that is that when you're speaking to people in the context in which they live, obviously you would sound crazy if you said, starting your conversation, that a 40-year-old man marrying a 9-year-old girl is not pedophilia. All right, you would sound crazy in this society, in this current atmosphere that we live in right now. You would sound crazy if you said that it wasn't. But also, when you validate that argument by saying that it is pedophilia, then you put the Prophet ﷺ in a very precarious situation, because he did do that. So you have to be careful in how you begin that argument, that you don't validate something that will turn around and invalidate a part of our religion. Because once you say to them, yes, it is pedophilia in our society, but, and then you make istidrak, you try to go back and explain, you put the Prophet ﷺ in a box, and now you're trying to go back and take him out the box. So you don't want to validate something and then turn around. You just explain that things change, societies change, the context in which the word pedophilia changed. When, as he just mentioned, you know, in American society, just 200 years ago, right? Many of our grandparents, especially those of us who are, you know, indigenous, you know, indigenous people here in America, African Americans, Native Americans, just 200 years ago, right here in America, many of our grandparents, you know, were pregnant at 13, 14 years old, which, you know, shows that was something that was normal in that time. All right, so I think that before we go to validating and invalidating anything when we start the argument, we start off by explaining the context in which pedophilia is defined. In this society, in the way that it's viewed in this society, in this time, pedophilia may be looked at as like this, but 200 years ago, it didn't look like that. Before you even get to the argument with the Prophet ﷺ. On top of that, not everything, this is a principle in our religion, not everything that is permissible is encouraged. The Prophet ﷺ did things for many reasons. Just because it's permissible doesn't mean that it's encouraged for us to do it. The Prophet ﷺ, marriage, أَبْغَضُ حَلَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ الطَّلَاقِ. The most hated thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made halal is divorce. Divorce is permissible in Islam. Is it something that is encouraged? No, it's not encouraged. Divorce is not encouraged. So not everything that is permissible is something that we are encouraged to do. The Prophet ﷺ married Aisha at 9. Can we recall any other incident in the history of Islam where something like that took place? If in fact you could go through the seerah and find some random situations, those are isolated incidents. There are exceptions to the rule, but not the rule. Was it the rule in their society that men married women at 9 years old? No, that was not the rule. Right now in Saudi Arabia, it is very common for women to be married at 16 years old. At 16 years old, she's considered in her prime. Saudi men have a problem marrying a woman 28, 29, 30 years old. They consider the women in that age range to be old. Absolutely. Consider yourself blessed as Americans. So, I mean, you know, it differs from place to place, time to time. So I don't think that we should start the argument off with validating that point and in turn around and invalidating the Prophet ﷺ. But I think that we should explain the context of pedophilia and how it should be viewed, and then explain how that was done during their time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I want to thank you all for listening. I want to thank you all for participating, inshallah ta'ala. We have time for one more. No.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to add to Mufti Muneer's self-esteem argument about Aisha questioning the Sahaba. I encountered a hadith, and you guys could correct me, inshallah, about Aisha actually objecting to the Prophet's statement about the shuhada not having, questionability and going straight to Jannah, and she objected with the higher authority of the Qur'an by saying, وَمَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ فَسَوْفَ يُحَاسَبُ حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا. So I just wanted to just bring that into light. If you guys could correct me if that's maybe a da'if hadith, or maybe you guys don't think that's a valid comment.
Okay.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi amma ba'd. As Abu Usamah mentioned, Dr. Hatim also mentioned that everything that could possibly be or is actually polemic or problematic has been answered over 1,000 years ago. Before there was Cambridge and Oxford, before there was something called Orientalism, before there was Ignaz Gozar and Joseph Scott and these people, the ulama of al-Islam had a detailed, refined system of that which is called al-mushkilat, whether it's a hadith or verse. A verse or hadith that is polemic, it's problematic. It's problematic. Allah tells us in the Qur'an al-Kareem in several places, they will not be spoken to on that day. Allah will not speak to them. Allah will not address them. And we find rather in one surah itself that Ar-Rahman will ask them. We will ask the messengers. We will ask those people. One verse says Allah won't speak. Another verse says, فَلَنَسْأَلَنَّ الَّذِينَ أُرْسِلَ إِلَيْهِمْ وَلَنَسْأَلَنَّ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. He says, indeed, we will speak to them. We will ask them. So the concept of something that's problematic, first and foremost, is nothing wrong with it initially. And this is a very crucial point. I repeat, the concept of you finding something to be problematic, it doesn't make too much sense, I don't understand, I have a problem with it, initially isn't too bad. Abu Zubayr mentioned the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, تَصَدَّقْنَا فَإِنِّي أُرِيتُكُنَّ أَكْثَرَ أَهْلِ النَّارِ. Or كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. He said, give charity. He spoke to the women. He said, give charity. Because I have been shown that you are the majority or the greatest amount of the denizens of the fire. What did the woman say? She says, أَيَكْفُرْنَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. She says, do they make disbelief? Why are we so abundant in the hellfire? In other words, the woman from the Sahaba, she felt what the Prophet ﷺ saying as what? Problematic. It was mushkil. She didn't quite understand. It didn't quite make total sense to her in the beginning. So the first principle is nothing wrong with finding something to be problematic in the beginning. Step one. Step two is you have to find what? A answer, a response. Not just any response, not just any answer, but an answer that is sufficient, that will remove the doubt, just like sickness. It's nothing wrong with getting sick. There's nothing wrong with you having this disease and this sickness. The problem is for you to linger for years without curing yourself, without seeking the medicine. That's the second point. The third point is, as just an example, is that there are some of the scholars of the past who wrote books on the times in which Aisha radiallahu anha challenged and debated and differed with Sahaba. We all know that the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu are of different levels. Some of them accepted Islam from day one, such as Abu Bakr Siddiq, Khadija, Waraq ibn Nawfal, some say Ali ibn Abi Talib, many other narrations. Day one, they were there. Some companions accepted Islam later on, some before Hijrah, some after Hijrah, some before Badr, Uhud, the list goes on. The companions have different levels. There were companions who had more knowledge, more time in, that were greater, bigger, and better than Aisha. And that did not stop her from saying, I don't agree. I differ. That's first and foremost. Imam al-Zarkashi rahimahullah, he has a book called Al-Isaba fi mastadrakhu Aishatu ala Sahaba. He has a book that he wrote in which Aisha differed with these big bad companions that were greater than her. But once again, her confidence and her self-esteem that Allah had given her, she said no. The next and final step is, did Aisha radiallahu anha, whether this hadith is authentic or inauthentic, did she reject the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu? Did she say Muhammad didn't say this, Muhammad so on? She never rejected the hadith of the Rasul sallallahu. That's impossible. That's impossible. Rather, another narration that states the things which will break the salah, if something passes in front of you, from those things, it says, al-ha'id, or al-mar'at al-ha'id, a woman who's of age. She said, لَقَدْ شَبَهْتُمُونَ بِالْكِلَابِ. She says, you've made us be, you're saying that we're like donkeys and dogs. If we pass by a man who's praying, the prayer is nullified and invalidated. She says, indeed, I used to pray in front of the Messenger of Allah and he never said nothing. So she herself used the hadith. She herself used the sunnah, something that she did in the company of the Prophet. And he acknowledged her in that. So to say that Aisha rejected what Muhammad said is very, very dangerous and erroneous. That's wrong. That's first and foremost. Secondly, Aisha radiallahu anha, what she did was she criticized the narrator. She said that the narrator made an error. Companion or not, Hudhayfa, Umar, Abu Hurairah, the narrator made an error. And the proof that the narrator made an error is because Allah says in the Qur'an,